Good morning, everybody. I'm Mayor Lauren McLean. Thanks for joining us today for our Saturday morning virtual listening session. We have questions that you submitted ahead of time that we'll tackle first, and thank you for those. And then I look forward to answering others on the YouTube chat. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that the sacrifices that we all continue to make during this pandemic. Thanks so much. And also, of course, last night, we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice. I want to acknowledge her legacy and all that she did to stand up for and blaze trails for women and others in this community. She leaves behind an incredible life, legacy, and history that I know many of us will be forever grateful for. And like many of you, I think I'll probably always remember how I learned, where I was when I learned that she passed. And it was my daughter, actually, that called to let us know within minutes. I don't know how she heard first, but within minutes of it being announced. And that too showed me what an impact RBG has had on our kids and the younger generation that recognize what she brought to the court and in her dissents particularly, but also in the work she did as an attorney beforehand, what she brought to our nation. So my heart, thoughts and prayers and wishes of peace are with her family. This week, I'm giving my state of the city, but it's different this year, as is everything in 2020. And so we recorded it earlier this week. We recorded it, I think, on Wednesday morning, actually. Next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, it'll start to stream through the Boise Chamber website. And in that speech, I talk about not only what we've been through this year and where and how, where we will be heading, how we'll do that. And of course, my deep optimism that as always, we'll come together as a community and recover from these challenges and with more strength and with a more vibrant community than we've had in the past. But I also talk about what else our city team has been doing in addition to responding to COVID around advancing housing affordability initiatives, economic opportunity, work, climate action, jobs, and of course, racial equity. So tune in on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, or of course, it'll be available after that if you can't watch it that evening. And to that end, of course, thanks for being flexible. I want to talk about a couple logistics. We have, well, first off, every now and then there might be a cameo of my son Aiden or my dog Maya, both of whom are moving through, and I guess Aiden's trying to get the dog. I think she's okay. And then, because I'm home this morning, like all of you are, and then we have 2 American Sign Language interpreters with us. As always, Sierra McIver and Lavana Andrew, thanks for joining us again. Seth Ogilvie is on this call and he'll be moderating the questions. As I said, we'll start with some questions from ahead of time. Then we'll go into live questions. And of course, we only have an hour, so we won't get to everything. And if there's a question that I can't fully answer, Seth will be following up with you. And for those questions that we don't get to, the same thing will happen. We'll follow up with you. So Seth, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, if you have a question that we don't get to or isn't answered properly, like get in the chat, get your info to the folks there. They'll get you in touch with me and I'll reach out to you. So quickly, I just want to go through how this is going to work. We're going to go through the questions that we got early, go through those, and we'll move over to the YouTube questions. And if there's some questions that we get a lot of repeats on, we'll try to answer them once, but we might go back to some questions at the end if some people come in later. I'll be turning my camera on and off so that you can really interact with the mayor. This is about her, it's not really about me. So with that being said, I'll start with the first question.
It's about them. It's not about me either, Seth. It's about the people that have jumped on to ask questions and have a conversation.
It's definitely not about me, though, that's for sure. Anyway, the first question we got from a lot of folks out there, this is a lot of people are really interested in 5G. So I'll just kind of summarize the main synopsis of the question. Why are these small wireless towers, the 5G, coming into our neighborhoods with inferior Wi-Fi to broadband? So many questions about this. Can you kind of walk us through what's going on here?
Sure. And first off, I will say it's a priority of ours, this administration's, to figure out how we can expand fiber broadband access throughout our city. It's something our economic development team is looking at. I've asked lots of questions. I would like us I would like to see us be able to spread fiber, especially as road projects are being done, so that more sections of our city have that kind of access to Wi-Fi, especially in this day and age when we have so much remote learning going on and remote working going on. A couple things on that. We cannot consider the health impacts of radio frequency radiation when deciding whether to approve a tower. Many of you have sent for several years now a lot of reading for me that I read as a city council person, I've read as a mayor around 5G. I recognize that you have concerns. The FCC has made it clear that cities can't look at the health impacts or some of the research that's been provided by some of you when making these decisions. And the request says, the order says that if we get a request for a tower and it meets our zoning requirements or the streetlight structural requirements, we can't say no. So that we just need to be clear on. And we are involved in applications for 5G installations in a couple different ways. A company might be requesting installation on a traffic light pole, but that traffic light pole is generally owned and operated by ACHD, the highway district. And so they're making a decision and we review the requests just to make sure that it meets our zoning code. That's all we're allowed to do in that instance. We might get a request for installation on a light pole, and light poles are owned by Boise typically. And so then we review the engineering schematics for these installation requests, the zoning code, as I mentioned, and then we make a ruling on it. And for companies to install on city-owned poles, they also have to have a license agreement with the city of Boise. And right now, Verizon's the only company that has that agreement, and it's been in place since 2017. When we think about 5G and cellular technology in general, as a city, we want to make sure that if there's going to be installation, we're going to use existing infrastructure so that we're not cluttering our neighborhoods with more towers, et cetera. And so that is something that we look at. And because we can only look at the structural pieces of it and our zoning code pieces, we are encouraging companies, if they're going to come with a request, to do it with an existing tower so we aren't cluttering our neighborhood views. And then finally, everybody should be aware that the Ninth Circuit is currently reviewing a case related to the FCC's decision that we can only look at zoning and structural issues when making approvals. And of course, our city is following that because the decision at the Ninth Circuit, which I imagine would likely be taken to the Supreme Court, will have impacts on our city as well as others. So that's where we are right now with regard to 5G.
Okay, the next question is from Taryn Mayer in Southwest Boise. They're wondering, how long will the mask mandate be in effect?
Sure. Did you say Taryn?
Taryn.
Hi, Taryn. The mask, I can't give you a definitive date on that. Of course, with COVID in general, so we all are seeking certainty on so many different things related to COVID, whether it be, when school will start, will our kids stay in the classroom once they get there, when mask orders will be moved, when we'll hit different levels of advancement with regard to reopening. And it really depends on how the virus spreads and it slows. You probably saw yesterday that, I think it was yesterday, that the percent positivity rate for our area has dropped. And that's a good sign. That's a really good sign. It means that the actions that we've all taken, our willingness to mask up, to maintain distance between people, have had an impact on the spread of the virus. The last thing I want to do is change rules, move too quickly away from masking when nationally, locally, all the experts are saying this has had an impact and is the most effective thing we can do. The last thing we want to do is stop doing that too soon, have another balloon of cases, and then be back where we were at the beginning of the summer. And so I see, while we're looking to the health district to determine where we are in recovery and virus spread, and they will, right now they have a mask order in effect. I will be thinking in alignment with them about the timing for when we pull that back, but also will tend to be more conservative when it comes to making sure that we don't move too quickly and undo all the good that's been done, and then undo the sacrifices that so many of us have made. We need to keep moving forward with patience, recognizing that if we move too quickly, we could be back in a place where we don't want to be.
Thank you, Mayor. The next question comes from David Ogden. He lives in Southwest Boise. He wants to know if you could explain and tell us some of the details about the diversity training that the city is doing.
Oh, sure. So the city is, I don't have specific details that I could provide you at this moment, but I can tell you this. The city staff have been asked to participate voluntarily in diversity training because it's important to us that we create an environment that welcomes everyone. And that means not only in our city, as I often talk about, but within our employee ranks and offices, because we need to foster an environment that welcomes everyone and honors the fact that we all have differences. And it's so important that we reflect our community in the people that we hire to serve this community. And so we are just getting going with department heads, and the city council is involved. My office is involved in the first steps of our diversity training program. In fact, I did a survey and had a conversation with the trainers just last week. And I believe that other department heads are doing the same. And from there, it'll grow out, but we're starting with leadership in the city offices. And then we'll determine from there where we head next. And it's my understanding, I think, because it is a voluntary program, that there's someone from each department that has already stepped up. And staff was asking us to do this when I came into office. There was interest on city council in doing this. And so we decided to move forward with it this year.
Thank you, Mayor. The next question is from Susan. She's on the West Bench. And she wants to know, when will you finally restrict people walking around carrying guns in the city?
Well, Susan, thanks for the question. We can't restrict that. We would have to unravel state law. And so that's a legislative fix that would have to be made. So I'd encourage you to talk with your legislators. In the state, people have the right to open carry and their rights to conceal carry. And that means in cities, our hands are tied when it comes to city buildings and other places as well. I appreciate the question. We hear often from people that concern and the surprise that the city allows this. And so I want to be clear that this is in accordance with state law, that the state has said that this is allowed.
The next question comes from Mary, and she is in Southeast Boise, and she wants to know why it is that you want to turn Boise into a sanctuary state.
Oh, interesting, Mary. I don't know why it is that you think that I want to do that, to be honest. I have committed to making sure that Boise is a welcoming city for everyone. We work with Welcoming City for All, as did the prior administration, and ensure that our policies, the organizations that we partner with, and other things in this community welcome all. We are a designated refugee city, have been since the 70s, and the richness of culture and diversity that partnership with IRC and other organizations has brought to our city is something that I truly value and am proud of. In fact, just this last week was Welcoming Week, Welcoming America Week, and the policies of our city were celebrated and referenced by national organizations for the deep history that we have in welcoming everyone and creating the partnerships from the city perspective with organizations that support those that are coming from other places. The work that we've done as a city was recognized for that. So I have not stated that I'm interested or moving towards moving Boise into sanctuary city status, but rather have committed and recommitted to doing all that we can to be a welcoming city for everyone, because people that choose our community as home are Boiseans, and we have to do everything we can to ensure that everyone feels safe and welcome here and has opportunity to build the life that we all dream of.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to move over to the YouTube questions. The first one is coming from Jessica, and she is wondering, what is the city of Boise doing to help restore the services of the United States Postal Service?
Oh, did you say Jessica?
I did.
Okay, hi Jessica, thanks for joining us today. I am going to have to ask staff to follow up with you on that regarding specific steps that we may or may not have taken to address Postal Service issues. On the ballots, election piece, all of that, I want to be clear that we've encouraged people to register for absentee voting, and we are working with Ada County elections to place boxes in various parts of our city so that people can walk up directly to a ballot box and drop their ballot in. And of course, we're looking at early voting locations at City Hall and other places. I have not heard from many people specific concerns regarding delays in postal delivery within our own city, but it could well be that our clerk's office or others are working on that. So we'll be back in touch with you on that one.
Yeah, Jessica, touch base with the people monitoring in YouTube, and I'll reach out to you when I can get that information for you in the next little bit. And for those that are following on YouTube and want to ask questions, get those into the chat box now, because we're getting towards the end of the questions that we have. The next one is from Clement, or Clement.
I didn't hear that. Sorry, Seth.
The next question from Clement, and they're asking, are we going to have a candlelight visual, socially distanced, and or with masks, of course, for Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Oh, that's a great question. I saw two announcements today. The city is not involved in any large gatherings because of the rules around large gatherings. So if people do gather, I will reiterate, as I saw that organizers of these events have, that masking and distancing is important. I noticed on Twitter this morning two different statements. It sounded like there was something happening potentially this evening. And so I would look at Twitter, because I didn't look into depth as to the location, but I think it might've been 6 p.m. But then I also saw this morning that Inclusive Idaho mentioned, and I think it was shared by Council President Clegg, Inclusive Idaho has a walk potentially at 1 o'clock planned. So both those things I saw on Facebook and Twitter this morning. The governor last night ordered flags at half-mast, and we were doing the same. And I believe the flags will be lowered to half-mast through her internment. And I'd encourage you to look at Facebook or Twitter for details on any gatherings that might be taking place. But I have to say that as we've stood in front of City Hall in advance of protests and vigils, that people must mask, they must distance, if not masked, because the last thing we want is these events that are legal because we have the right to assemble and to speak out, not become events where we see COVID spread.
Thank you, Mayor. It looks like a couple of people may have shown up a little late. We had another question about your State of the City address. So maybe if you could give some of those details again.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the State of the City this year, I mean, many of you have probably watched it before or attended in person. It's different. It's not a giant production with big reveals, and it's not in person. It is a speech that I recorded on Wednesday, and it will be available online to watch beginning this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m. We've partnered with the Chamber, as we often have, and also with City of Good, which is a really neat local organization that came to be during the stay home order. City of Good was the vision of, and now is the how would we best call it, the creature of restaurateurs who wanted, and food growers, folks that needed a place to have their food go and needed something happening in their kitchens when restaurants were closed. and recognize that residents at homeless shelters needed meals, as did families who were food insecure and often relied on schools for that connection with food. So City of Good came to be, and there are various restaurants in the city that have participated, and they create meals that are delivered to students' families, and they also have done over the last couple of months lunches and other food at Interfaith Sanctuary. So they have partnered with the Chamber and the City of Boise, and are you can go online if you want and get a meal to eat while you're watching the speech on Wednesday night at 6, or you can just watch the speech once it starts streaming 6 p.m. And in that speech, we talk about a couple of things. It was important to me that we touch on, of course, everything that we've been through in this crazy year 2020, recognizing the sacrifices that residents have made, the service that our employees and our city council have provided to this community, and the creative thinking that's required to meet day by day, week by week changes in response to the challenges of COVID, the challenges of climate, and the challenges that we've been forced to reckon with around race equity and racial justice. And so talk about not only how we've taken steps to protect our community's health, how we are responding to the economic crisis and the deep, deep hurt, especially of small businesses, but then how we move beyond by addressing housing affordability, climate action, economic opportunity, and prepare for what I believe will be a 21st century economy that will look different because it must post-COVID. So join me, and you can watch it, as I said, on Wednesday at 6 p.m. I think it starts through the Chamber's website, and then it'll be available after as well.
Thank you, Mayor. We have another question from Tasso. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. They are curious about your public transportation plans.
Sure. Did you say Tasso?
Tasso.
I know one Tasso, so I imagine it's maybe it's the one Tasso I know. If so, well, regardless, hello. So we have, coming into office, transportation and addressing traffic and congestion, building out agreement at the elected official level through deepening relationships around regional transit was and continues to be very important to me, but also recognizing that we need to reimagine mobility too, looking at the potential for canal pathways to connect residents from as far out as the farmland towards our foothills, but importantly, everything in between. Building relationships with the highway district to better address pedestrian needs and bike needs. And of course, COVID has changed some of that because we have more people working at home. Fewer people are getting on buses right now because of concerns around it. And so currently, and also there are programs like CityGo that were focused on getting people to use alternative modes of transportation because there wasn't enough parking downtown. So many things have changed around that, of course. We're still working closely with VRT, the Valley Regional Transit, to make sure that we can meet the needs of our residents, whether it be increasing service along State Street and Fairview, which we're still looking at, and ultimately being supportive of increased regional transit. Elaine Clegg has taken the lead now on working with Senator Crapo's office and regional folks around restoring Amtrak service to Boise. So she's involved in that because that's really important to us. And we have an initiative that's beginning where we're going to build out a vision and a plan for what canal pathways ideally would look like throughout our region or community, city, just as we did 50 years ago for the Greenbelt, like mapped out what it could look like so then we know what we need to do. And we're building those relationships and having conversations with canal companies along the way. And of course, you've seen some of what's happening downtown on 8th Street for some of the changes for bike and parking capacity along 8th Street. And we continue to work with the Highway District on, increasing as many bike striping lanes as possible, and trying to figure out how best to fund more of that so that more of, because every one person that gets out of a car and moves to work in a different way is one fewer car, that as things get busy again, that those folks that have to drive have to deal with. So that's how we're looking at it.
Thank you, Mayor. We got a couple more questions from Carla and Steve around the FCC laws and 5G. If you wouldn't mind going over that again, maybe they missed it in the beginning.
Sure. So what I said at the beginning regarding the FCC and 5G is this. The FCC has ruled that cities only are able to look at zoning and structural issues around when asked by a 5G installation company to put a tower up or to attach something to a tower. We are not allowed to take health concerns into account because we can only look at those two things. ACHD, as both these folks and others know, have ownership and oversight of traffic lights. So if they're going to go on there, the applications go to ACHD. We review to make sure that it's meeting our zoning codes. And then if they want to put something on a street light that the city owns, we look at the structural city light city light structure, as well as the proposal, the engineering from the proposal, and make sure that it meets our zoning codes. And if it does, they move forward. With all of this cellular infrastructure, we want fewer poles and fewer big towers in neighborhoods. And so if somebody does come with an application, we're going to encourage them that rather than asking for their own tower, that they make an application to either put it on a street light and go to the city, or put it on a traffic light and go to ACHD. And then finally, on the FCC ruling, there's a court case currently before the Ninth Circuit, and that's our circuit, so that'll make a difference in how we move these. The decision will impact how we move forward in the future. And so, of course, our city legal team is watching that. I imagine, regardless of the ruling that the Ninth Circuit makes, there will be an attempt to take it fully to the Supreme Court. But that's only, from past experience with court cases and rulings that are contentious with folks on both sides advocating heavily for their preferred outcome.
Thank you, Mayor. And this might be our last question because it seems like we've just got a lot of stuff on this topic in the feed. But some people are also curious, why 5G and not fiber? Is there a reason for that?
So I couldn't tell you why the companies have decided to do 5G versus fiber. What I did say at the beginning of the listening session was that I recognize that we need fiber in our community. The governor has rural fiber programs, broadband programs going on right now with some of the CARES funding. And we are looking at how we, in the future, can make sure that as streets are torn up, fiber is laid. Because we've known for a while that we need to head in that direction, but it's become more apparent with COVID as more of us are working at home and more of us are going to school from home, and that coverage is really important. In fact, my street has been torn up for over a month and we don't have fiber on our street. And to me, it's a perfect example of when a street is torn up and you can see all the pipes, or we could for a while see all the pipes down there. That we should also have figured out a funding source and a way to look at this, maybe even as a utility, to be able to lay the fiber when the streets are torn up for other piping changes.
Kind of on that note of growth, some folks are curious about housing. I mean, it's kind of been a hot topic lately. What's the city doing as far as like making sure that people have affordable houses to live in?
Sure. That is, it's been a hot topic for a while, and we're seeing yet again with COVID that our market has taken off, and because they can work from anywhere, and more people are starting to look at Boise. That puts intense pressure on our residents because our wages aren't keeping up with the cost of housing in this community. So I know it's not a new problem, but I recognize that it is becoming even more and more pressing for so many. So there's no one silver bullet for addressing affordability. There's no one city that's gotten it right that I can point to and say, this is what we're going to do. But I can tell you that what we're doing is taking a portfolio approach to affordability. We are compiling our land assets that we have and determining which ones are along transit lines and in appropriate places to put into a housing land trust or a housing land bank. And then that land is available to put out for RFPs for housing that meets different affordability criteria. A perfect example of our first step of that is the Franklin and Orchard neighborhood that's been proposed up against the park at the corner of Franklin and Orchard. We have this year set aside funds into a housing fund to be able to acquire land and then actually to be able to invest in affordable housing proposals. So the housing land trust is a big piece of our portfolio, but it can't be the only thing. You might have seen in the Statesman a couple weeks ago, we're just now starting to work on the public engagement process around housing affordability bonus ordinance of such. And so I want to hear from the public and from builders of homes and apartment complexes, what is the best portfolio of incentives to ensure that we're getting what we want, which is more affordable housing. So this proposed ordinance looks at density, parking, other things, and in particular areas of our city along transit corridors. And we will be putting that out for comment because we want to make sure that if we're going to take a step, that we're doing something that'll actually get us what we want, which is more houses that are affordable to different income levels of residents within Boise City. We also, it's important too to look at our zones throughout the city. So we just named and announced, and they actually met, I think 2 days ago, the zoning ordinance rewrite committee that will be working to advise our staff and then a larger zoning rewrite process that will go out to the community and work on zoning changes throughout the city to make sure that we can provide ample space for ample homes, because we need more homes, and a zoning rewrite and a look at the rules that we have and where they are will make a difference on that. So we're doing that. And then also I want to flag that, another part of this is ensuring that those who are in homes can stay in homes. And so we have provided funding to partner organizations, nonprofits that work to keep people in their homes by representing them in eviction issues. We are looking at ways we can help support back payments on utility bills, other things to keep people in their homes, or to make it possible for people to move into a different home, because often it could be something as simple as not having paid a utility bill for X number of months when you have economic hardship that makes it harder to get into the apartment that you need. And so we're looking at that too. So quite a bit of different policy angles that we're taking to make sure that we do as much as we can, as quickly as we can, to address some of this.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. So Graham from the East End is curious about the small business program. How are those grants going to go out? How are they going to be allocated?
Sure. So Graham, it sounds like you saw that we announced the small business grant program. And I want to point out that the reason we did that is we know that small businesses are hurting the most in this crisis. It's not just here in Boise. Nationally, small businesses are really hurting. But also small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy. You pay for yourself and you pay for employees. You generate stability and generate ideas that beget other businesses. And so making sure that we could do everything we could for small businesses was important to us. We had CARES funding. We didn't get it directly from the federal government, but we got it through a pass-through through the state. But some of that funding we could use to reimburse our own expenses around COVID. And so we developed the small business grant program. We put $1.5 million into that fund, and small businesses can apply. You can go online to City of Boise to find the rules and the application process. Small businesses can apply for up to $15,000 through that program. So we've done that for small businesses, and that's important now because too many of our small businesses in Boise did not receive funds through PPP or the federal government. So we want to do something to support you. So you can find that at cityofboise.org. But then I also want to flag that If you have suggestions for other ways we can help small businesses throughout the city, we'd love to hear them. And you can reach out to by email Mayor McLean at cityofboise.org or info@cityofboise.org and share those ideas. We'll take a look at them. Our Economic Recovery Task Force put together, we convene business leaders, university leaders, and think tanks to look at the strengths and weaknesses in our economy, and then to project opportunities that COVID would bring through challenges and that we had due to our strengths. And they said we've got to focus on a couple things, and that's protecting health of our residents, workforce development and investments in new economy innovations. And then of course, education is a big piece of that too. And so now we're working with those leaders and others to determine how we best as a city support innovation, small business, strength and resiliency, and overall economic development opportunities. So please, if you've got other suggestions, ideas, things you want us to look at, send them our way. We'd really appreciate it.
We're definitely always listening in. I want to hear a little bit more from Jessica. So Jessica, make sure that you get your info into our folks there, and I'll get back to you. And if we don't have any more questions from YouTube, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Mayor, and we can wrap up and put a bow on this one.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. It was great to hear your questions. Look forward to the time that I can actually see your faces while you're asking the questions, and we can have more of a conversation among all of us. But until then, have a great weekend. The air will get better. It's going to be sunny, I think, tomorrow. And so try to get outside, enjoy the time that you've got. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back virtually again next month as we do these once a month, and really appreciate the questions and conversations.